just tonight, out of curiosity, how many men tonight have served or are serving? Just if you could, just stand. Would you stand? Stand. Stand. Stand for me. Let's give them a round of applause. Just out of curiosity, where did you serve? National Guard. National Guard. Good. Vietnam. Where? Pardon? U.S. Army. Anybody else? Air Force. We have any Marines? What's that? Navy. We have any Marines? I know we got some Marines in Oskaloosa, so pretty cool. Good stuff. You know, this whole month we've been going on the second mile, and man, I tell you what, it's been some pretty incredible stuff. Brian's going to speak tonight and give us some more stuff. But this last weekend, I had the opportunity to go up to Des Moines, and if you guys have ever had the opportunity to go on our homeless shelters that we're going to do again this year, we're going to go to, I think, 4 of them, right, Ryan? 4 places. And anyway, we found some pretty cool things, and I just encourage you guys, great way to get out of shopping with your wife, for one thing. Okay? But we're going to meet here between 7:30 and 8, and we are going to leave promptly at 8 o'clock. We've got 2 vans. We've got a couple of vehicles going, so it will be a great time. We'll pick up lunch somewhere. You know, we went out and checked out, it was called the Zombie Burger. We were going to go check the Zombie Burger out, and that's kind of where we were thinking about eating, but the problem is, when we went there at 12 o'clock, it was packed. It was an hour wait. But normally we get done about 1 o'clock. So we'll send somebody down if we can get there in time. Has anybody had a zombie burger before? There's a few guys in it. Was it good? Yeah. Very good. So you'd be in for a treat if we can pull it off. So I'm just going to encourage you. And it's also a great event to, you can bring your kids along. You'll be responsible for that. But also, too, it gives you another opportunity for outreach again, to bring somebody else going the extra mile. You know, here's some information that I didn't realize, that because of Iowa. We have in our homeless shelters in Des Moines, I didn't realize that because of I-35 and I-80 is a crossroads in the Midwest, there are more people from across the country, also from Canada and also from Mexico, than anywhere in the United States. They come to Iowa because it's a cross center and trying to find direction. And the other thing I found interesting too, because they there's also too, they have a special up on the 3rd floor for men that have been that are veterans, and 14% of the population, I think it was 200 beds, right, Ryan? 14% of those men were in that homeless shelter, and I found this also interesting, that it was also from the Korean and Vietnam War. And the reason for that is because they didn't have this stuff that as far as mentally and also to helping veterans get plugged in back in the workforce until after that. That's another reason why that count is higher, and also those men are there. So I'm just going to encourage you. It's going to be a great opportunity. You guys heard a couple of stories that I shared with you last year. It is a great opportunity to go and serve people that are less fortunate. And then too, I'm just going to encourage you, if you get an opportunity to go, is to take the time to sit down and listen, because there's some incredible stories of why those folks are where they are. And a lot of, too, they said, too, a lot of the women were there. A lot of those women there are due to the fact of some situations of abandonment and also to abuse. So that's why that's a stop for them to get to another location, because they're running. So anyway, just some really good things that we found out, but I'm just going to encourage you guys, step into this event. And now everybody too has one of these at your table. Now the reason why we did this, I want you to do this, probably this is the biggest reason I want you to have it tonight. I want you to take it home, and I want you to pray about it. If you have family coming in, no problem. We don't want you to miss out being with your family over Thanksgiving. It's the last thing we want to do. But if you have the opportunity and you can go, I want you to just pray about it and ask whether this might be an opportunity to go the 2nd mile. Okay? And then also, too, we just want to remember Curtis and his family with the loss of Derek Moore. just a tragedy was this weekend, and the funeral was on Monday, right, Curtis? So anyway, just Curtis has had a loss in his family and we just want to remember them in this time, and as we go through different things and in the midst of life. Sometimes there's hard stuff that we have to go through, but it's encouragement when other men will come up and just say, hey, I just want to pray for you, or you're in our prayers. Sometimes it's good when you're going through those tough times just to let someone know that you care. Okay? Let's have a word of prayer. We got another video coming up, and then we'll bring up Brian. Dear Jesus, I just want to thank you again for this night. I thank you for the opportunity, Jesus, that we can come and serve you. I just pray as the different things that we do and we have fun, and those are all good things. We enjoy that as men. But Lord, I just pray as Brian gets ready to come up tonight that you would give him the words to speak to our hearts tonight about what you were saying about going the extra mile and how it's not very crowded. I just pray that you'll speak through Brian to speak to our hearts, and that our hearts and our minds would be open to you. In your name I pray. Amen.
Okay, we're going to go really, really fast today. I know normally I go at a real slow pace, but today we're going to go really fast. So I again apologize thanks for leaving your glasses, Mike. I'm sure I will need those at some point. But here we go. Get your pens and paper out, because I want you to write something right out of the chute. We're going to just lay the groundwork for where we're going. As my pastor, Kevin Corver, would say, I'm going to give you the sermon in a sentence. And I'm going to just have you keep coming back to this thought, because this is what I've been thinking about as we have set up this theme of going the extra mile. It's never crowded. What I've been playing with in my mind is, why do we do that? You guys and none of us need one more talk saying, this is what we need to do, go get them, rah rah shish kumbah. We've all heard that, and yet something must be missing, because if in fact it's not crowded at the extra mile, something's missing. We've all heard the, hey, this is what we should do it talk enough. So that's where I'm coming from. So here it is. Stop trying and try dying. Stop trying and try dying. So where we're going tonight in a few short moments, and when we get together in our groups as you're going through your questions, and Lord willing, and I've been praying hard that this would happen, once you leave here, what I really want to have you do is the same process that I've been going through over the last couple weeks as I prepared. I want you to truly and honestly, maybe for some of you, it may be the first time, I want you to examine your heart. I want you to examine your relationship to Jesus Christ. And I don't want you just to blow it off and say, and go on as normal. Here's a big part of where I'm coming from, because I want to give total credit to a lot of the ideas, if not all the ideas. Many of you maybe heard of a book called Not a Fan by Kyle, I can't say his name very well, Idleman, however it is. Same author that wrote War of the Gods, I think is the title of that one. And so here's his question. Here's where we're going to start the process of tying some of the thoughts in his book to our theme of going the extra mile, and that's this. His question is this: are you a follower of Jesus? So if I ask that, I would dare to say, by peer pressure or otherwise, in a group like this, most of us probably raise our hand and say yes. But right out of the chute, here's my question to you. Remember, I'm not asking, do you go to church? I'm not asking, are your parents Christians? I'm not asking, have you ever appeared in a church directory? I'm not asking, is your ringtone on your phone a worship song? I'm asking, are you a follower of Jesus? Because he makes a very clear distinction between a follower of Jesus and a fan of Jesus. And that's where we're going to go tonight. So where does this saying come from? Most of you probably knew. I kind of had a vague idea. It's kind of at the back end of the Sermon on the Mount. Reading from Matthew, you have heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you to take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Now you got to realize in the culture of that day, here's kind of the background. Some of you maybe knew this, I was a little bit clueless. Basically this comes from the fact that a Roman soldier by law had the right to ask you, an Israelite, at any point in time that he deemed necessary to take his stuff for a mile. You could be on your way to work, and if a Roman soldier came up to you and said, hey, you would interrupt your day, your process, wherever it was that you were going, and you would have to go and carry his stuff for a mile. So if you can imagine the cultural hate and the bitterness that we've all somewhat become familiar with as to the Israelites to the Romans that are in their territory. So put yourself in their shoes. If America were occupied and the occupying army at any point in time could say to you, carry my stuff, carry my junk, drop what you're doing, your life's not important. And then here comes Jesus at the back end of the Sermon on the Mount, listing all these different things that if you read through them somewhat, they're pretty radical. They're really not just kind of, oh, by the way, this would be, it's really kind of because it's early in his ministry, it's really kind of the playbook, if you will, of what it is to be a disciple of Jesus, what it is to be a follower of Jesus. So here's where Edelman goes in his book. He says that and this is where I want us to get started tonight. This was some of the most revealing stuff to me because I've done some of this stuff for 52 years. Not consciously, maybe the first handful of years, but for a long time. He says that we need to go through a process of defining the relationship moment. We need to define our relationship with Jesus Christ. And he kind of related it to that conversation most of us could relate to when you're going through the dating process. When the significant other looks at you and says, where are we going? What is this relationship all about? And you got to lay it out. It's either, well, I'm just kind of dating around having a good time, or we're moving forward. So that's the direction. If you can put your head around, that's what you're going to need to go to. Because here's what I think Jesus is asking us. If he were sitting at Smoky Row having that kind of a relationship conversation with you, he would want to know, is your relationship with me exclusive? And we're going to get into that one because that's the one of many that hit me between the eyes. Has your relationship with Jesus moved from past the infatuation stage toward a deeper devotion and dedication stage? Is it a casual thing, maybe on Sundays and an occasional Wednesday night at Vital Men? What exactly is your level of commitment? Because gang, here's what I've come to the conclusion with over the last couple weeks of study. In order to go the second mile, we must be a follower of Jesus, not just a fan. So what's a fan? I think we could all have our own definition of a fan. A fan is an enthusiastic admirer, whether it's in the sports world or otherwise. We've all seen people that are crazy, fanatical, over the top, zealous, all kinds of adjectives I could use to describe a fan. But fans want to be close enough to the action, but they don't really want to get too involved. And the same is true of fans of Jesus. Fans of Jesus want to get close enough to get all the benefits that maybe come with Jesus, but not so close that it requires anything of them. Fans often confuse their admiration for devotion. They mistake knowledge of Jesus for intimacy with Jesus. And for some of us that grew up in a town like Pella, not all of us, because I know that's not the case, that's a huge one for us to wrestle with. Some of us have a tremendous amount of head knowledge. Again, I'm not pointing fingers, gang. You're going to hear my testimony about as point blank as I could give it to you as to where and how my life and my relationship with Jesus Christ turned around. Jesus is not interested in fans. He calls us to follow. Here's a quote that I ran across today that I just thought it was interesting, from Martin Luther. A religion that gives nothing, costs nothing, and suffers nothing is worth nothing. Let's look just for a quick moment. We're going to quickly review. Most of you are going to be familiar with some of these stories. They're found in the New Testament. The first one is found in John 3, and you'll get a chance to kind of look through some of this at your small table. But the story in John 3 is the story of Nicodemus. He's a Pharisee, a secret admirer of Jesus, and he's kind of playing the game that a lot of us maybe are playing. It doesn't cost him anything. Becoming a follower always is going to come with a price. But in verse 2, it's kind of interesting. It sets the stage for that relationship right out of the chute. In verse 2, it says to us right there that Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. He could have come at any point. He had heard Jesus probably speak many times, but he comes at night. And man, here's where the rubber started meeting the road for Brian Vanderlyn. He could come to Jesus and have this conversation without impacting his job being a Pharisee, his job being one of the religious guys. So my question to me and to you is, how about you? Is your relationship great with Jesus as long as it doesn't affect your job? His friends and family wouldn't have to know by his coming at night. How about you? How about me? It's okay as long as the coworker doesn't think I'm one of those Jesus freaks. This will be a question I'm going to ask you to get into. How has following Jesus disrupted your life? 52 years in Pella, Iowa. 52 years in Pella, Iowa, and I can't say I've had my life disrupted. Now here's what you need to know about this whole conversation tonight. It's not a deal about, it's about looking at your own heart. It's not a deal about, oh geez, Mike Serig has had his life disrupted and he's made all these changes. Or it's not about my good friend Doug Deers. His life's been disrupted and he's taken in kids from Africa into his home. And he must be a better Christian than me. You know what? It's about me examining me. And it's about you examining you. But I think that's a valid question. How has your love for Jesus disrupted your life? You know, most of us don't mind making some minor changes. But here's the deal. Jesus wants to turn our life upside down. And that's going to look completely different for all of us. Fans are looking for a tune-up. Jesus wants a complete overhaul. Fans might want to apply a little makeup. Jesus wants a makeover. Fans want Jesus to inspire them. Jesus wants to interfere with your life. Nicodemus had made a decision about Jesus, but that's not the same as following him. Jesus wouldn't accept a relationship with Nicodemus where he simply believed, and I don't think he will with us either. He's looking for more. Jesus is looking for more than words. He's looking for how those words are lived out in our life. I was brought to Matthew 7. Verses 13 to 23, bear with me, I'll just read them to you. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, only a few find it. Sounds like the extra mile. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferociously wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus by their fruit you will recognize them. Here's the kicker. Here's the one that shook me to the core. Here's the one that said, I got to get serious about this inner conversation, this inner thinking, starting at verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the ones who do the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. It's interesting, in the gospel, in all the gospels, Jesus says the phrase, believe in me, about 5 times. He says the phrase, follow me, about 20. Those two are firmly connected. They're like the lungs and heart. You can't have one without the other. We can't just say, yep, I believe in Jesus, and then there's no change. Again, I'm going to keep hammering this. Believe me when I say this. We are thankfully saved by grace. But out of that, following should look different. Our following should look different. So when we consider going the extra mile, we need to consider this connection of believe in me and following me. We need to look at what that is. If there's differences, we need to look at how those two are tied together. So here's my question to all of us. Are you ready for Jesus to interfere with your life? Or are you like Brian Vanderloon and avoiding this, afraid of what he might screw up? That's a hard question if you've got guts enough to answer it. I've shared with you many times, yes, Lord, I'm a believer, but just don't ask me to go to, you name the city, because it's going to screw up my kids. Man, my kids are playing basketball, football, Pella, it's great schools, and so what do you think? I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter what you think. But I know that it's been put on my heart. If your relationship to Jesus is a yes, but, that's going to go about as well as my relationship with my wife is, yes, honey, I love you, but. So there's a second define the relationship story. It's found in Luke 7. It's another fairly familiar one. It's the story where Simon, another Pharisee, invites Jesus to come have a meal at his house. And to quickly buzz through the story, to give you some of the, when you were in that culture, when you came to that house, you would wipe off their feet as the host, and you would provide them a towel to do so, and you would kiss them on the cheek, and you would do all these things. But Simon the Pharisee chose not to do any of those things. So it was a major diss to Jesus. He really was putting Jesus in his place as far as what he really felt about him. But here comes this woman. Hard to know what part of some of those stories that she maybe has overheard, but here's a woman, a known prostitute. So can you just imagine if in your church or at your Thanksgiving dinner, here comes this known prostitute. It just would have been kind of like you couldn't believe it. But here's a woman who came and she was weeping. She wiped her hair, which, by the way, was a major taboo. That would have been just short of a woman coming up here in the front of our church and disrobing. That was just not what you did in that culture. But she also poured out all of her perfume onto Jesus' feet as she wiped it. The Pharisee had tons of knowledge. The problem is that you and I can also have knowledge without intimacy. Boy, that's hitting Brian Vanderloon right between the eyes again. Man, I was blessed to be raised in a Christian home. I was blessed to be able to go to a Christian school all the way through 8th grade. I've been blessed to be a part of great youth groups. I've had some of the best ministers in the country. I have had all kinds of wonderful experiences. I've got a lot of knowledge compared to an average person. Biblical knowledge. But can I tell you, until about 8 years ago, that was it. So here's one of my questions to you, same one I asked of myself. When was the last time, if you're thinking, okay, I got this relationship thing down, so here's one of the hard questions. When was the last time you poured yourself out to Him? Literally poured yourself out. Read through the Psalms. When was the last time you went to Him because you had nowhere else to go? When was the last time tears literally streamed down your face when you expressed your love to Him? When was the last time you demonstrated your love to Him with reckless abandon? Or to fit it into this month, when was the last time you went the extra mile and people thought you were crazy? Here's my challenging question. Do I know about Jesus, but not really know Him? I don't know if you've ever heard the story of Matt Emmons. I never had. Again, Edelman talks about it in his book. But he was an Olympic target shooter, I think 1980, somewhere a few years ago. And he had a medal, possibly even a gold medal, all wrapped up. And the interesting part about that story is that he was down to his last shot. All he basically had to do was hit the target and he would have won at least a medal. Well, he hit the guy next to him's target. He was aiming at the wrong target. So it's interesting because in Matthew 23, there's another define the relationship conversation that's going on that fits that idea of the wrong target. And that whole conversation is not just with one person. Jesus is having that woe to me conversation, woe to you conversation with the Pharisees and Sadducees. Because here's the problem with those two groups of people. It's not Jesus they're following. Instead of Jesus, they're following rules and regulations. They've confused their target. Some fans, right here, here's my story. I've already alluded to it. Some fans are like the Sadducees. A little bit of background on the Sadducees, very brief, but they were born into their place in the religious community. It was not something that they chose. It was tradition or heritage. So can I just tell you, Brian Vanderlyn grew up acting like Christians act. I talk like Christians talked. I listened to music that Christians should listen to, but I never fell in love with Jesus until 8 years ago. My faith has always been more about honoring my parents and my heritage. Or I should say my faith was always more about honoring my parents and my heritage than it was surrendering my heart. What about you? Have you ever actually surrendered your heart to Jesus? It sounds like one of those altar call things. I don't know. I go back to that passage where he says, I didn't know you because you didn't know me. Some of us might be more like the Pharisees who measured their faith by the hard work that it took them to learn the law and then obviously follow the law, some of which they made up just to make up rules. They say the right things, do the right things, but it's not a reflection of who they are, nor is it really a reflection of who you are. In either case, can I tell you that we can say the right things and do the right things, but that's not enough for Jesus. He wants all of you. That's why going the extra mile is more than just doing the right things, guys. Playing the part, it's about following Jesus. It's about giving him everything. Because when that happens, here's the blessing that I've been able to experience the last 8 years. The extra mile, the stuff just flows out of that commitment, out of that relationship. Much like a marriage relationship. If you're fortunate enough to be blessed to be in a relationship that is just at a sweet spot with a woman, in a marriage relationship, that's what happens there too. It stinks doing some of the things that you do, whether it's dishes, whether it's this, whether it's that, but you know what? I love doing it because it flows out of my love for my wife. Hang your hat on this one. Jesus does not expect his followers to be perfect, but he does call us to be authentic. Can I say, being a Pella native, that is a major struggle. Maybe not just Pella, maybe the whole area. So here's the last piece of this. Here's where, because we can all try harder. Here's the last piece. Here's the component that I think came hand in hand with my commitment 8 years ago, and that was you cannot be a follower of Jesus unless you're filled by the Holy Spirit. You can't do it. John 16, great passage where Jesus is talking to his disciples and he promises his Spirit. And here's the really interesting thing. He promises that we'll be better off. Edelman makes an interesting comment. He says, how many of us haven't sat around when we're doing Bible discussion talks and said, oh man, that'd have been so cool to be Moses and to have those personal conversations with, or it would have been cool to be David, or it would have been cool to be this prophet or that. Can you imagine someday they're going to probably when we all get to heaven, they're going to go, oh, I bet that was cool when you had the Spirit right in you. I love that thought. That's awesome. Edelman shares a great story, and I think it's a great picture of where some of us are when we're trying to go that extra mile, when we're trying to live the life that we've been called to do, when we're trying to be followers of Jesus. And we've all been here, or at least some portion of this story, and it's real short, real brief, but here it is. Have you ever been to the airport? And he paints this same picture, and I could live it because I've done this, whereas the dad, you're the guy that gets to carry all the luggage and then some, and this was when my kids were much younger, and somehow or another, they made it onto the moving sidewalk, but because of the wideness of my load and all the stuff I was carrying, I didn't make it, and so I'm huffing down the thing trying to keep up with the whole family, and so that we end up at the right place at the right time at the same time. That's the picture some of us are living. We're going down life's going, and we're just trying to keep up, and and we get to the end, and we're just tired. We're cranky. We're crabby. Because we're trying to do it without the power of the Spirit in us. We're exhausted. We're unable to go the extra mile. So here's one of the quotes that I wrote down from last week. I thought this was awesome. What a tie-in. Did you guys catch this when he said, is your God still in heaven or is he in you? That's what we're talking about. Jesus promised the gift of the Spirit. Going the extra mile means living in the power of the Spirit. So how do we do that? It's going to start by acknowledging my weakness, your weakness. The only way to be filled with the Spirit is to empty myself of me. That's maybe one of the hardest tasks. Fans eventually get burned out trying to live the Christian life under their own power. Followers understand that it's a journey that they will never have to make alone. Because here's the deal. The extra mile isn't a one-day or a one-time deal. If we're called to be followers, the extra mile is going to be there for us to go again. And the extra mile is going to be there again next week, next month, next year, for as long as we're called to be here. So where do we go from here? What does Jesus want us to do tonight? It's interesting when you have, in Jesus' ministry, you have those people that come up and they want to be followers, and the one says, hey, I got to go bury I got to go say goodbye, and then another one says, I got to go. And notice Jesus' response. I think part of what he's saying is when you make that decision, you got to make the decision now. Because it's not so much about whether you love your parents or love your family or any of that stuff. Jesus called, they had excuses. So we're going to go through some things tonight. And you can say the right things tonight. You can bluff your way through the conversation. I'm telling you guys, tonight before you leave here or before you hit the pillow tonight or at some point, don't blow it off. You need to have that heart-to-heart conversation, whatever that looks like. So what does Jesus want from us? 2 verses that stick out real plainly. One very familiar. It's seen at every sporting event in the world. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. That's the believing piece. The one that you don't see at the World Series or the Super Bowl is Luke 9:23. Anybody know it? I know a couple of you will. I'll help you. Then he said to them, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Those two, heart and lungs, have to go together. Take up your cross daily. It's not a one-time decision. It's a daily decision. So that means going the extra mile is not a one-time decision either. So dying to yourself, that's what must happen. Remember how we started this? If you want to go the extra mile, if you want to be a follower of Jesus, stop trying and start dying. Each of us are going to have to figure out what that might look like. What does it look like to die to yourself? If I could pray one prayer for each of you tonight, that would be it. Lord, show me, through the power of your Spirit, what does it mean in Brian Vanderloon's life? You fill in your name. What does it mean in my life? What does that mean? I don't know. That might mean spending your lunch hour, instead of going to the gym or to Arby's or to Subway, that might mean serving someone else's needs, whatever that looks like. That might mean the next time you're talking to a coworker, instead of playing it safe, you bring Jesus into the conversation. That might mean that you and your family, instead of going to wherever on a family vacation, maybe you decide to go on a work mission trip instead. That might mean when you see that empty room or bedroom in your home, you ask Jesus, God, is there an orphan somewhere? Is there a child somewhere that needs a home? And mean it. You know, it's interesting, and I could relate to this. Edelman talks about that song, I Surrender All. Here is what I'm going to suggest. Great song. But I'm going to make one little tweak to the song. Move from general statements to specific. It's real easy to say, I surrender all, and then walk out the door, and that's it. That's me. I've sung that song hundreds of times. But until I think we get, it's like goal setting. This were a business seminar and we were talking about goal setting. It's real easy to say, I'm going to sell 25, I'm going to sell a bunch of cars this month. But until I get specific, you know what? It's real easy to say, I'm going to surrender all to you. You know what? I'm going to surrender my free time. Father, I'm going to surrender my free time on what I'm watching on TV. I'm going to surrender what I'm doing at 5:30 in the morning because I know that I need to be closer to you. How do I do that? That's going to be different. I'm going to surrender the relationship with my kids. I'm going to surrender the relationship with my wife to you, God. Show me what that means. Know that when you accept the invitation from Jesus to follow him, you are not saying that he is the top priority in your life. Wait for it. You're making him the only priority in your life. That threw me for a loop. I'm still trying to get my head quite around that one. When you say that you want to be a follower of Jesus, he's not just, he's it. I don't know. You don't do that on your own power. So here we are. We all need to examine our hearts and ask. I think here's a big question. What is competing for your loyalty? To what or to who does your heart really belong? Edelman, in that book, if you're not sure, he's got a list of questions that may steer you to what your real gods might be, what maybe is top priority. Here's some of his questions. What disappoints you? What do you complain about the most? Where do you make financial sacrifices and for what? What worries you? Where do you go when you're hurting? Or what infuriates you? I think those are legitimate questions to ask ourselves. If we're trying to figure out at what place Jesus desperately wants you. But we got to figure out, guys, he doesn't want to share us. That's why in the Ten Commandments, he's a jealous God. So until you've surrendered everything over to Jesus and truly put him above everything else in your life, above your family, above your career, above your money, above your toys, above your entertainment choices, until he is first and only, can I say that you and I will not know the true joy and satisfaction that comes when you go the extra mile. So let's spend some time going through some of those questions, guys. Again, we've been together long enough. I think we can be real with each other. I think we can be real with each other, and I think that's what we're called to do tonight. So blessings on each table. Start out as you need to. I might suggest some prayer just to take off the false fronts, and let's get serious about where we're going with this thing. So thanks for your attention, guys.